Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
We are ready.
The Post Standard, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Syracuse Post Standard. How do you hear me?
We have you loud and clear.
Wonderful. Thanks for taking our Zoom today, Jeanette, Matt. This is your first space flight. What's it like to wake up in space every morning?
I think the funniest thing, and it still happens to me, there's lots of things when you wake up in space, but the funniest thing that happens to me is I'm just wildly disoriented. I know that I'm standing, I've been sleeping in this vertical chamber or horizontal, who knows what it is. But I wake up every morning just thinking I'm in some different orientation, upside down, and I have to reach for something and grab it to get orientation. But waking up and feeling you're completely upside down all the time is super fascinating.
And I'll just add that waking up in space every day is still amazing, but it is so, it's odd to not have really an up or down. So you wake up kind of just disoriented almost every day, but then you realize you're in space, and it's awesome.
Well, you've now been in space, both of you, for 2 months. Is it feeling routine now? Are you discovering new things? Are you still getting used to some things?
Well, lately we've been practicing flips in space, and so just learning to move is a new thing too, because every time you change your position, Matt, would you go upside down for us? Because any way is up. I mean, you're still kind of acclimating because it doesn't matter which way you're standing, that's up for you. So like I'm up, you can be upside. Yeah. So I mean, this is very new for us, as you can imagine. So like we're both up in this case, but his perspective is different from mine, but we're still both up. So just little things like that, being in space is kind of cool.
Our crewmate Mike Barrett told me before we launched that despite the fact you can be in any orientation up here, if you really want to have a conversation with somebody, it's really hard to have a conversation when you're oriented like this. It's because we've been attuned our whole lives to understand somebody's facial expressions when you're both oriented in the same direction. So if you're going to have a serious conversation with somebody, it's important to have the same orientation so you can interpret their body language correctly.
Jeanette, I think it's only fair that now that we've seen Matt's spin that you've been practicing, that we see your spin.
Touche, okay.
There we go. Good work. We've been flipping since we got up here, but we've been trying to perfect certain particular moves. We're coming up with a top 5 list, top 5 space station moves to go through the day. Maybe we'll send videos down eventually.
Each of you have had years of intense training to be where you are right now, up in the ISS, 250 miles above the Earth. Have you run into any situation, and it could be something minor, that you were not prepared for? What surprised you so far?
Yeah, I would never say that I was actually scared. I mean, nervous. I think I've been nervous because I think the big thing for most of us is that we don't want to make a mistake. We want to be very careful on how we approach things and how we execute a procedure, especially when people on the ground are depending on us. Their research is vital up here, and the results that they get here will translate to future, research and products that we use for the moon, for the space station still, for the moon, for going to Mars potentially. So, making a mistake is like, you get nervous. You want to just do things correctly.
That's a good a segue into the next question for you. Can each of you draw the connection between what you're doing right now on the ISS and what one day might become a Mars mission?
Go ahead. All right. So I would say it's all about we. I mean, for the most part, we are the experiment. The humans in space are the experiment, and any science researcher would understand, or statistician would understand, that it's all about increasing sample size. And the more humans we can get in orbit, the more we can understand what happens to the human body for long duration spaceflight. And I think folks struggle with a sense of scale. We are 250 miles above the surface of the Earth, as you mentioned. The Moon is 250,000, so that's 1,000 times further. And Mars, at its furthest point from the Earth, is about 240, 250 million, so another 1,000. And so the scale of things really is boggling to the human mind, and getting prepared to go that far to Mars is a big deal, especially if, for example, this microphone is the sun, and the Earth is here, and Mars is over here. Sometimes they're close, and sometimes they're far apart, and that makes it really difficult in terms of time, distance for going to Mars. So getting people in space, seeing what happens to them, getting the reps, and practicing first by going to the Moon is really the first step. So us being up here for a continuous basis, some people for 6 months, some people for a year, really builds the data set to understand how to live and work in space and ultimately go to Mars.
What's the biggest misconception that us Earthlings down here have about space travel or about living in space that you can kind of shed some light on now, having 2 months up there?
There's so many misconceptions. One of my favorites is that there's some magic line you pass where gravity just disappears. We're very much still in gravity right now. We're falling. We're going around the Earth, constantly falling towards Earth. We just keep missing the Earth, right? We're falling and we just keep missing because we're going so fast. So I think it's like roughly high 80s, 90% of the gravity you feel on Earth, but we're just falling the whole time. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions.
That's one of the biggest, but there's also like atmospheric drag dragging you down. There's all kind of things that we're still moving downwards. For me, one of the I guess the biggest surprise is some of the questions that kids always ask is how do we do things, how do we eat in space, and I think like one of the things we eat just like you guys. It's just that we do not have like a stove with a frying pan and things like that, but same food is packaged, we heat it up or we rehydrate it. Even our, the bathroom is a little different. So, there's slight little misconceptions. The other thing that I think is not understood well is that everything floats up here. It's moving in some direction. So if you're doing research up here, you really have to figure out how to do it so that things don't float away from you, that you can keep everything in front of you. And the way fluids move in space is very different than on Earth. So research up here, there's an understanding that has to come before you can develop an experiment around the way things really operate here.
Can you tell us, each of you, a little bit about the experiments that you're working on right now?
Well, right now we just had SpaceX 30 here. There were tons of experiments on there, from DNA sequencing. We did some PCRs of certain DNA bacteria that we find here on station, and that was sequenced up here. So we're doing a lot of really interesting things. Matt was working. We both actually got a chance to work in a biofabrication facility, where they were actually trying to build cells of a heart, cardiac cells. So these are, like Matt said, we're the experiment, but those experiments sometimes they're not taking our cardiac cells and things like that, but they're demonstrating that they can actually fabricate different things here in space. So those are a couple that I got a chance to be involved in, like Code Atom Lab.
Yeah, quite a few experiments. One of the experiments I'm involved in that's on me specifically is we have a bicycle, we have a treadmill, and we have a resistive lifting device that we use. the treadmill is really nice, but it takes up a lot of space and has a lot of mass. And for trips to Mars, we may not want to carry that much mass with us because there's just so much propellant necessary to accelerate it and decelerate it to get to Mars. And so we're looking at ways to not use a treadmill. And so, for example, I'm in an experiment where I'm up here for 6 months and I never get on a treadmill. I only ride a bike and do resistive exercise.
So you've been up there now for 2 months. You probably got another roughly 4 months ahead of you. What are you most looking forward to?
Well, over the next few months, we're going to have visitors come next week. And then we may do another port relocation. We may do, I know that we're going to have several EVAs on our timeline that I'll get to help with. And I think Matt is scheduled for the first spacewalk with Tracy Dyson. So we're going to have a lot of different activities as things go on. But I enjoy kind of sinking in and really getting the feeling that we actually live here. This is our home. We take care of it. We're compatriots in this, and this is like, Matt's my across the cabin neighbor, and we live and work together, and I love that feeling. Even though I miss my family, we have a lot of connectivity to them. We have a lot of email that we can do. We have Teams. We have different ways we can call them and see them, have audio and visual with them. So even though we're here for 6 months, it's still a short amount of time. I just like this feeling of getting settled in and really living here.
I'm really looking forward to it. I look forward to dynamic ops. I like when things are going fast. Yesterday was great. We all got to pile into the Dragon, 4 of us, and go around the space station. Jeanette mentioned EVAs, getting people suited up, doing robotics operations. And then when I like to settle down, I really love just going to the cupola and taking pictures out various windows. They're just incredible sights to see. So going fast and taking pictures is what I look forward to.
For those who might not know, Matt is a test pilot and a combat flight guy. He's got lots of experience there. So, Jeanette, I got a question for you. So your family moved to Syracuse from Mississippi during the Great Migration, and now you're extending your family's journey into space, which is remarkable, and you're helping to contribute to humans possibly migrating to other planets. Can you just take a moment and reflect on this remarkable journey and what it means to you?
That is a great question. I never thought about that, but that is amazing. I mean, I keep using the word while I'm here in space, amazing, fantastic, exhilarating. I mean, you name it. And, these thoughts that come to me are very reflective, and it makes me think about the future. And, just being a part of it is important. Being able to give back and contribute to all of this is very important to me. And that's why I think this whole notion of settling down and actually kind of living here, writing a journal and reflecting on things like that, it's important for the furtherment of human exploration and just getting more people involved. And I do think that the more people that fly, the more this becomes a regular thing, the better off. We'll have better research, we'll have better countermeasures on Earth and on the Moon and potentially in Mars. So you gave me a lot to think about. I appreciate that. That's a lot.
Well, I'll make it easier with this next question for you, Janet. This is a quick one. So you've got 6 siblings, including a very accomplished twin sister. Does going to space for 6 months give you an edge in the sibling rivalry department?
Well, so she was baby B, so I'm baby A, so, there's no competition there. So, but, it's funny, we never really competed as kids. I always wanted her to do well, and if I saw her doing well, I wanted to do well too. So we just kind of played off of each other, just in the sense that we wanted each other to do well, and we set the bar high for each other. and for ourselves. And so we just kept pushing each other forward. And I'm doing something that was never on her radar to do. And she's definitely, I could never do her job. She's been at the Patent and Trademark Office since 1998. She loves that job. She learns stuff, new stuff every day, just looking at different inventors' ideas. So, you know, even though she's baby B, there's no competition. We're in it together.
Matt, this one's for you. You have two young daughters. Is it difficult being a space dad? How do you stay connected with them? And what are they curious about when they talk to you?
We're really lucky that we have lots of communication up here now. I mean, we are the satellite, so we get to communicate with other satellites back down to Earth pretty easily. They want me to play. They want me to do flips. My youngest daughter is always saying, Dad, play with the water. Show me the water stuff. Blow bubbles in the water. She loves that aspect of it, and I think they every now and then like to show it off a little bit. You know, if I call down and one of their friends is there, we have a quick chat. So it's I am part of a Navy family. My wife is very strong and independent, and it's great that she's able to do that without me at home. But you know, this is how we grew up. I'm going on deployment, so this is not something entirely new. It's just a little bit harder now that they're older and can recognize that I'm gone for so long.
Thank you, Matt. Now, you just put a question on my list that I didn't have. Did you bring water? Is there water nearby where you could demonstrate this to us childish adults?
I am a 42-year-old child, and there's people who have all of these experiments are probably very excited that I don't have water right now to blow up a bubble of water. Whenever we do that, we always have towels nearby to capture the water. But it's quite a bit of fun to do that, to play with up here. And I'm a 42 going on maybe 12 sometimes, having a good time up here. You see us laughing and playing quite a bit up here. We have a blast.
Okay, I got a serious question for you. This is for both of you guys. Some people argue that humans should focus on solving problems here on Earth: poverty, war, famine, global warming. We all know the list goes on. And rather than waste, resources on going back to the moon, let alone Mars one day, given your experience on ISS, what do you say to them?
I think Jeanette and I both want to tackle on this question. We're both ready and pounced. There's lots of ways to look at this. I mentioned earlier talking about a sense of scale. The amount of money that we spend on this resource as a government is incredibly small in terms of the national budget. It's a fraction of 1%. And I think about your person in the United States or around the world for that matter who brings home some income level, right? You spend the vast majority of your income surviving, living, paying for your home, paying for your food, paying for the things. But if you have an eye to the future, you spend a very small fraction on investing in your future. Maybe it's savings, maybe it's investing in education. It's something that invests in your personal future and you going further somewhere else in life. So the U.S. government, or governments around the world for that matter, the fraction of a budget they spend on spaceflight and research and exploration is investing in the future. Because if you only spent money on the status quo, you'd never advance or never go further. So we are just a tiny fraction that's investing in the future of humanity.
And I'll just add to that, when you do have a space exploration program, I believe that many jobs are also created. Interest in STEM is also generated. And so in increasing these two items will help grow a country too. I mean, every time you have an idea, a new idea, for example, Intuitive Machines, that's a new company that started for space exploration that created a number of jobs for the future. So as we have, as any country develops a space exploration program, they're developing jobs for their country. They're developing, increasing the interest in science and technology, and hence innovation in their own country as well. So I think it only generates, it generates a lot more for a country if you do have a space exploration program than taking away from the monies that can go to other people. I think it's generating money that can still go to other needs within the country. It could be infrastructure, it could be people in need, it can be a number of things, but that money can come from having a space exploration program that generates dollars for the country.
Well, thank you both for talking to us today, and thank you for your thoughtful answers and your candidness and humor, and we really appreciate it. Jeanette, specifically, thank you for giving Syracuse a shout-out pre-launch. We love that down here. We were all here in your hometown immensely proud of your accomplishments, so thank you. And thank you so much, Matt, for joining and talking to us today as well. Godspeed.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston Station, we're ready for the event.
Associated Press, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press. How do you hear me?
We have you loud and clear from the International Space Station.
Well, Mike, Jeanette, it's a pleasure to talk with you both today from the Kennedy Space Center. You've got important guests coming next week, the first Starliner crew. What, if any, extra precautions are you taking ahead of the docking, since this is the first time Starliner is arriving on your doorstep with passengers?
Well, the first precautions are to kid-proof the station, because Butch and Sonny are really good friends, and we kind of know their behavior. But all seriously, the arrival of a brand new vehicle, the first crewed flight of a new generation spacecraft, is a really big deal. You leave nothing to chance. So, in fact, we just finished a conference on our training schedule for it. We're going to be going over every detail involved in the rendezvous approach docking, and every little nook and cranny of possibilities that we need to look at. So basically the same procedures and precautions we would take with any vehicle, except the excitement ratchets up a little bit because it's a brand new vehicle.
Is there anything that you could do to help Sonny or Butch if things don't go exactly as planned during the rendezvous, or is it pretty much all in their hands?
Well, to be sure, it is in their hands as the vehicle commander and pilot, but of course there's a lot of other hands standing watch as well. Those in mission control, the Boeing team, which is built and services spacecraft. There'll be a lot of people watching. We'll be monitoring the approach, of course, and getting a little bit more involved as they get a little closer. But this is an autonomous vehicle fully capable of free flight, and we're looking forward to seeing that demonstrated.
Well, do you have your welcoming party all figured out yet? What are you going to do for the big occasion?
Well, whenever any crew arrives, the crew that's on board usually help prepare the station for their arrival. That means getting their sleeping quarters, their sleeping bag ready, even looking for some of their items, personal items that may have come up early. So we're really just going to try to make it more welcoming as they come on aboard.
Well, Jeanette, I have another question for you. What is the most thrilling thing you've discovered about living in space so far? And I'm assuming it was worth the long wait, but you tell me.
It was definitely worth the long wait. There's so many things that wowed me. When I saw it, wow. That's all I could think. And just the feeling of being weightless in space, this whole feeling. And this was the biggest wow. You just kind of float, and it's natural in space. It becomes natural, I should say. But the biggest thing for me was seeing the planet from this vantage point. It's absolutely breathtaking, and its beauty, its position in space, the blackness around it, all of it will just, it just causes you to gasp and just say, wow, that's our home, and there's nothing nearby. So we really have to take care of our planet.
Well, I can't help but think about current events on Earth, and the Earth must look so peaceful from space. If only you could, I don't know, beam back that sense that you're talking about to the rest of us down here.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, I think what most astronauts have said was that you don't see the lines dividing people from here, and it is just one planet. And there's nothing extremely close by except our moon. So the impetus to take care of it when you see it is, to me, is normal, because there's nothing like seeing our home from this vantage point.
Another question for both of you. From a physiological point of view, what is the best thing about spending months in weightlessness, and what's the worst thing from your body's point of view?
Well, this is kind of my passion, Marcia, as you're probably aware, the human in space, how we adapt to our capacity to change every system in the body to try to make us better for being in this environment. And to me, one of the most amazing things is how effectively we become three-dimensional creatures. We totally unload ourselves, and we can navigate in 3 dimensions, up, down, sideways, and we keep an upright posture, mainly for the cameras, for the folks on the ground. But for us, it's totally natural just to do this and put ourselves in a position, let me recenter a bit, put ourselves in a position that works well for us when we move to another work site. So the way we change, the way we move, the way we handle large masses totally changes while we're up here, and that's all part of that adaptation. We become very comfortable, 3-dimensional, zero-gravity creatures, and it's amazing that we have the capacity to do that. I think, to me, that's the best thing. I'll let Jeanette maybe think about a worse thing.
The worst thing for me is that, everything here floats. The dust, everything, we float. And for me, breathing in some of that stuff just because it's like having seasonal allergies sometimes. And so that's, to me, is probably the worst. But like on Earth, you deal with allergies, you take Claritin or something, and you're fine. So it's not really the worst, but, that's one of the things that I have to cope with.
Or do you find yourself sneezing more than often up there, Jeanette, or what's that like?
Not just sneezing, but just a little bit more congestion, because we also have a fluid shift in our body. So if you have an allergic reaction, you get the itchy and you get a little bit of swelling, but you take your allergy medication and you're better. So if that's the worst, then, I deal with it on Earth, I can deal with it here.
What about from a psychological point of view, the best and the worst of months in weightlessness? Talk a little bit about that now.
Well, the psychological impact is that we are still really connected to the Earth through different means. Like we have Teams that we can use. We still have our email. We have a phone that we can use to call people. And we have other software that allows us to see and talk to our family and friends as often as we want. So psychologically, I think we're way better than we were even just a year ago with the tools that we have with staying connected to Earth. But on the other side, I like to remind myself that I'm in a unique environment and I only have a short amount of time here. So for me, staying in the present, enjoying what I have here and telling people about it, I think that keeps me motivated and keep me going. So the motivation is high.
let me just add that one of Jeanette's superpowers is being able to effectively share this experience with others down on the planet, and she does that regularly. And I think there's a big boost in being able to share this experience for us personally as well.
Well, you know, two of your Russian colleagues are in the midst of a one-year mission, right? From where you guys float, how are the two cosmonauts doing with such a long mission? And could you ever envision yourself doing that by choice?
Well, first of all, Oleg and Kolya are doing great. They were chosen for this experience for good reasons. They're both very professional, well-mannered, and just a lot of fun. We have an excellent relationship with these guys. We see each other every day. We talk frequently. Psychologically, physically, they're both very strong. I would also point out that Oleg Kononenko, who I've known for a couple of decades now, is also the records holder for the cumulative time in space. So he knew exactly what he was getting into, and he's flourishing up here just fine. As far as my own personal choice, I actually was willing to spend a year up here as well. It's interesting to see how we adapt. The adaptation happens over a period of several weeks, and that gives way to endurance, and that's a whole different chapter in things. And 6 months goes by in the blink of an eye, but I would love to see what happens beyond 6 months at some point.
Well, is NASA going to take you up on your offer? And should NASA be flying more one-year astronauts like the Russians do on occasion? What's your thought on that, Mike?
Well, I wish it was up to the individual to just say, hey, I'm ready to fly, book me on the next flight. It's not. But we have certainly been willing to fly people under various circumstances, planned and otherwise, for a year. We can do it. Our food habitability countermeasure systems are very good right now, and we can do it with a fair degree of confidence. As far as should we, we're accumulating the experience we need. We share data with our Russian colleagues, and I think we will have a pretty informed database of what happens to people when they fly for a year, which will serve us very well when we want to break orbit and head to Mars for these potentially multi-year missions. So I think we are developing that experience base organically, and it's paying us forward.
Well, another question for you, Mike. As a repeat space station flyer, how is your body doing this time? Better or worse than your previous missions? And do you think age is a factor at all in how it's adjusting up there? And also a belated happy birthday, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. I had a pretty amazing birthday celebration. It seemed to last for a few days. So I will say personally that I actually adapted quicker during this time. Now, how much of that, even though there was a 11 or 12-year gap between the flights, how much of that is cognitive strategies versus what's innately remembered by the body? That's up to debate. I'm not sure. But I felt very comfortable very quickly up here, just both handling the fluid shift and some of the other changes and being able to navigate in 3 dimensions and handle things and not lose stuff. So I would say that whatever factor age may have played, I did adapt more quickly, this being my 3rd space flight. I know that we've flown several people in their 60s. My colleague Don Pettit is going to ratchet that up and I believe turn 70 if all goes as scheduled. And we find that if you are relatively healthy on the ground, you can navigate and get along pretty well up here. So I think that we've expanded that age envelope considerably, and I think it's appropriate to do so.
Oh, for moon crews, when NASA is picking its moon landing crews, what other attributes, all the astronauts we know are very well trained, they're all in good shape, of sound mind, but what extra oomph might they need if they're going to be assigned to a moon landing mission? What do you two think about that? What kind of characteristics would you be looking for if you were picking a moon landing crew? And especially the first crew.
Well, I think Mike has a lot more data on this, but only thing I can see is that, it's not necessarily the first time that we've been to the moon, but it's been a long time. So they have to set the set the target and, learn a bunch of new things and do all of these things for what seems like the first time. And being the first in anything is always tougher than the second person, third person, fourth person. But, there's many other things that they're going to have to do, and I think Mike has a lot of those.
Well, I don't have any more data than Dr. Epps does. She's being modest, but just like with the Apollo era, it'll be a small ship. It'll be a new ship. They're going to be doing things on the moon that have never been done before. Compared to what we have from a habitability standpoint, ample space, ad lib, and almost unlimited access to water and oxygen and consumables and food. It'll be a very austere environment, very expeditionary, very exploration-oriented. So they're going to have to be very single-minded, very disciplined, and very well trained to handle all these conditions, very similar to what we did in the Apollo years.
Are there any traits that come quickly to your mind that you would have at the top of your list if you were picking the first moon landing crew? What kind of traits would you be looking for?
Well, I think I can honestly state that we bake those traits into selection now. So when you look at the astronaut office, you've pretty much got a group that organically has and expresses those traits. But you're looking for people who are adaptable, who can handle conditions that are less than pleasant, who kind of expand their comfort zone rather than get uncomfortable out of their comfort zone. We try to train in ways that challenge similarly. We will put people in austere environments where they're cold and wet and hungry and uncomfortable. And that, again, expands the comfort zone a little bit because that will have some similarities to the moon landing. And, of course, training as much as possible on the system. So I think the traits that we're looking for moon landing are very much baked into the standard traits we expect of everybody in the astronaut office.
It seems to me that, I'm not sure, would you be looking for another Neil Armstrong type? I mean, he certainly was the cream of the crop among his peers, and history has proven that, as we look back.
Well, I'll add that, of course we want those types like Neil Armstrong, but, building the foundation and making it just slightly broader, I think Mike's right, I think those characteristics are still within the folks in the office, a fighter pilot. We have research scientists, geologists. So a lot of these traits that expeditionary behavior, they're flexible, adaptable, they understand that, some of the analog missions that we do, you're under real threat of, risk for things happening. They're not analog missions where it's always going to be safe. So having that mindset of understanding that, performing under those conditions and performing well and coming out on the other side fine and okay, and understanding that you took a risk, that it was high threat, that you still survived it. There's a lot of things to the mindset that comes along with it, but I think Mike's right. A lot of the things that we do, those traits come out of every individual in the office who goes through those things. So I think we'll definitely have the Neil Armstrong types, and I think we'll add to that a little bit in the future.
And on my last question, on the opposite end of the spectrum, can just anybody in passable health of any age, adult, could you see that anyone just coming up for a couple months, or regardless of, just an ordinary citizen, do you think that's going to be farther down the road, or what's your take on just anybody coming on board? And since this is my last question, I'll say goodbye now, and Godspeed to you both.
Okay, well, it's a great question because it's actually being answered real time. As you know, the spaceflight population is expanding both from a commercial standpoint and an international standpoint, even outside of the standard partnership that we've had with the International Space Station. So for the last few years, and even more so these last couple of years, we've been flying a lot of folks outside of the professional astronaut cadre, and for the most part, they do very well. We're not quite safe enough, or we don't quite know enough to open it up quite to everybody with a standardized risk, or keeping the same risk with everyone, but it's expanding rapidly, and I expect that trend to continue. And that's an exciting thing for us. NASA's charter is to explore, certainly, but part of that is to open the space frontier, not just to keep it to a really highly select group. And we've really welcomed and enjoyed having spaceflight participants up here. So we expect that trend to continue.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much.
Just to add one little bit. No, the big thing I was going to say was that we have thousands of applicants that apply to the Astronaut Corps, and who knows that a lot of those folks understand the risk. Maybe they have the same mindset outside of the Corps as well. So we'll see in the future who applies and who wants to go to space. I think you'll find that they have a lot of the same traits.
Well, thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Godspeed on the rest of your journey, and talk to you again soon.
Station, this is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes our event.
Artemis 1 embodies the hard work of thousands across the world determined to explore for the benefit of all.
After years of testing and talking and testing some more, Artemis 1...
You are looking at the world's most powerful rockets. Artemis 1 embodies the hard work of thousands across the world determined to explore for the benefit of all.
After years of testing and talking and testing some more, Artemis 1 finally carried the dreams and aspirations of the world back to the moon.
I knew this would be an exciting mission. I mean, we haven't left low Earth orbit in over 50 years. Nobody on my team had done it. Most of them weren't even alive back when we did it last.
It has been a culmination of many years of hard work. It certainly represents a lot of that design and effort that we have put in to build the first human spacecraft for NASA in over 50 years.
It sent a message to the world that we have laid the foundation for a generational rocket.
We are not just going to the moon, we're going to prove that we can live and work on the moon and establish an outpost on the moon for future distant exploration out to Mars and beyond.
I'll never forget coming in the afternoon and everything is just working per the timeline, and you're starting to feel like, you know, today might be our day.
Great news, no constraints to launch.
You know, I'm sitting on the console at my station and things have been pretty quiet, and you know, you start to get this sense like this thing's going to go this time.
And here we go.
In the wee hours of that morning of November 16th came, it all fell together, and the payoff was a launch that shook you to your foundation and signified that America was back on the road to the moon.
Vehicle lifted off the pad. The windows began to shake, and the building announces that that vehicle is flying.
I was overwhelmed with joy and excitement, not just so much for me, but for the entire team, for the country. It was eye-watering.
And I was tearing up. What an amazing accomplishment for this team.
I'm still shaking a little bit. That never gets old. That is always one of the coolest things you'll ever see in your entire life.
There's like, oh my gosh, this adrenaline rush just hit you. And I knew this is it. It's game time. We're off and running now.
For the first time in 50 years, we were breaking out of low Earth orbit to head toward the moon.
And attitude for solar redeploy. Saw deploy initiated. Copy. Flight NPO for solar arrays released.
After the vehicle was put in its preliminary orbit, meaning Orion and the ICPS, we had to wait for translunar injection, and that was a whole different game.
Let's go have a good burn and let's go to the moon.
Let's do it.
Now, if you think about hitting a keyhole in the sky, it was all about that translunar injection burn from the ICPS. Without a perfect burn from the ICPS, we weren't going to the moon. We certainly weren't going in the right place.
That little RL-10, the engine that could, went on and had the longest burn it had ever had in the history of the RL-10 program, which goes back many, many years.
SLS set us up for success. The launch vehicle and the insertion point was over 99% accurate to where they predicted.
Orion is now flying free, attached to the European Service Module and on its journey to the moon.
We had video from Orion shortly after the translunar injection burn was complete,
Orion flipped around and we took pictures of the Earth, and I had no words. It was just amazing, amazing.
The views of our blue marble in the blackness of space, now capturing the imagination of a new generation, the Artemis generation.
It was 4 days to cross the line of demarcation to enter what is called the lunar sphere of influence, and you could see the Earth beginning to recede.
Our first big burn was the outbound powered flyby, which is the one where we went right by the moon. Orion was actually on the backside of the moon, so we did not have communications with it, so we had to set everything up ahead of time. When we lost the signal, we waited, held our breath, said some prayers, and then sure enough, it came out from the backside of the moon, and we were on our way to the distant retrograde orbit.
Distant retrograde orbit, we're going to be about 38,000 miles away from the lunar surface.
Artemis 1 traveled approximately 268,000 statute miles from Earth.
One of the really fantastic moments during the mission was where we saw the first image of the farthest point that any human spacecraft has gone before. We see these images downloaded real time, and we would sit in the rooms and we would just pause the meeting. We'd pause the discussion, go, look at that picture. It's almost unreal. They really represented as if we were there on board the spacecraft, looking at the moon and looking at Earth, our home.
We're continuing to get some spectacular views from the Orion spacecraft. Orion now has its sights set on home.
NASA's newest moon explorer, now less than 2 hours away to complete its shakedown mission.
When you hit the Earth's atmosphere, entry interface, we did what we call a skip entry, where Orion bored down into the atmosphere for a period of time, then it popped out, and then it skipped upwards of it was thousands of miles.
And if you don't come back into the atmosphere with accuracy, you will skip out of the Earth's orbit and not be able to return.
And we did that intentionally because we wanted then to come back down and do a second heating cycle. We were coming back into the atmosphere, basically a double heating to really stress the heat shield.
It's hard not to hold your breath when all of that's happening, because I'm thinking to myself, if this doesn't go well, what do I do? What do I have?
That was the major objective of Artemis 1. We had to prove that that heat shield would be rock solid to sustain a crew, because if you don't ablate the heat, you're done.
And there it is, high over the Pacific, America's new ticket to ride to the moon and beyond now in view.
Finally, on re-entry, that was a culmination of that 25-day mission that we waited with bated breath to make sure our baby came home.
Splashdown, Orion, back on Earth.
And when it hits the water, everyone just goes. It's just a rush to get to the capsule as quickly as we can. And so the teams, they feel the sense of urgency. The small boats move, the helicopters move. We're taking imagery from the air. We handled the recovery capsule like it was a fragile egg. We wanted to make sure that the heat shield got all the data that they needed, that everything, all the mechanisms were preserved.
From Tranquility Base to Taurus Littrow to the tranquil waters of the Pacific, the latest chapter of NASA's journey to the moon comes to a close.
You could sense a sigh of relief in the flight control room in Houston, knowing that our job was complete. We had brought Orion home successfully and set the stage for grander things to come in the future.
It was a testament to the hardware, but it was a testament to the teams.
We have you loud
all
and clear.
of the teams that had a hand in bringing that hardware together.
We learned so much about how this vehicle is going to operate, and we proved that it is ready to put humans on board.
For Orion and for Artemis, this is just the starting point.
Next thing is getting ready to fly the crew on Artemis 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, your Artemis
I think the funniest
2
thing, and it
crew.
still happens to me, there's lots of things when you wake up in in space. But the
So,
funniest
waiting
thing
in
that
the
happens to
wings,
me is I'm just
Artemis
wildly
2.
disoriented.
And now,
I know that I'm standing,
the humans are
I've been
getting on
sleeping in
board.
this vertical,
Thank you to the NASA workforce.
chamber.
Thank you to our industry
or horizontal,
partners,
who knows
everyone in
who
Europe
knows
that's
what it
working for
is.
this.
America
But,
has made a
I wake up
very
every
deliberate
morning
choice
just
over
thinking I'm in some
decades to
different
curate a
orientation,
global team.
upside down,
And
I
we
have
are going to the
reach
moon
for
together.
something and grab it to get orientation.
We
But
need to
waking up and
celebrate
feeling
this
you're
moment in
completely upside
human
down all the
history.
time is super
It is the
fascinating.
next step on the journey that gets humanity to Mars.
And I'll just add that
Am I excited?
waking up in space every day
Absolutely.
is still amazing, but it is so,
Initial reaction to that
yes,
news
it's
was
odd
just
to not
intensity.
have a
Finding
feeling
out
up or
was a
down.
humbling
So you
experience
wake
for
up
me.
kind of just
Shocking. It's the best word I can say.
Disbelief, an immense sense of honor and responsibility.
Putting the first 4 crew members on Orion is what I'm so excited about. I want to hear the stories about what it is like to live in the Orion spacecraft.
We're going to test out the vehicle's ability to conduct rendezvous maneuvers, crew's ability to actually fly Orion manually, and most importantly, we're going to test the environmental control system. We got humans on board. We got to keep them safe. We got to keep them breathing. And then we're going to have them come back at that high-speed entry of 32 times the speed of sound to make sure that they can survive this for future missions.
So like I'm up, you can be upset.
It's very
Yeah,
exciting
yeah,
to
so-
fly crew, but it's also daunting,
this
right?
is
Because
very,
these are people,
new for us,
and they're
as you
putting
can
their
imagine.
lives in
So,
our
like, we're
hands.
both up
This one
in this case.
needs to perform
But,
and
you
will
know, his
perform
perspective is different
as
from mine,
good or
but
better
we're
than
still
the first
both
one
up.
did.
And so we have
So
new
just
launch
little
commit
things like that.
criteria. We have changes to our procedures, changes to our timelines.
We have new systems for
Our
crew.
crewmate
We
Mike
have new
Barrett,
systems in the
told me
capsule.
before we
have
launched
an emergency
that,
egress system. We
despite the
have
fact you
new
can be in any
recovery
orientation up
systems.
here,
We want to make
if you really
sure
want to
that
have a
we've
conversation with
gone
somebody,
through
it's really
those
hard to have a
time
conversation
and
when
time
you're oriented
again,
like this.
so that when launch
It's
day
because
rolls
we've
around,
been
we're
tuned our whole
ready
lives to
for
understand
anything
somebody's
that
facial
the hardware may throw at
expressions
us.
when you're both
By
oriented in the same
building
direction. So
incrementally
if you're
these
gonna have a serious
capabilities,
conversation with somebody,
improving these
it's important to
capabilities
have the
that we
same
have
orientation so you can
through the
interpret their
Artemis
body language
campaign,
correctly.
we will be able to live on the moon
Jeanette, I
and be
think
able to
it's
perform
only
science
fair
that is
that
very
now that we've seen
important for
Matt's,
deep space
spin
exploration.
that you've been practicing, that
I'm
we've
ready
seen
for
your
Artemis
spin.
2. The SLS team is ready for Artemis 2.
We are ready for Artemis 2.
We are ready.
Okay.
We are ready.
All right, I'm ready. Let's go.